it's all wood. You know, the wooden walks that they see the cowboys come down. There's nothing in it. And that's where your man's at. And he says, come down on Thursday. He says, come, bring your guide, stay with us. We went down, stayed in the ranch. We had elk for dinner, and they had this. His friend had about 20 miles of the stream that ran into the Blackfoot of Montour Creek. It was full of fish.
Hello and welcome to the Ireland on the Fly podcast about the people and places of fly fishing in Ireland. If you're not into rugby, stick with us, as we do also cover fly fishing on this week's episode, as we talk to Mike Cosgrave, the former coach and centre for Connacht, who was also a passionate fly angler and who fished Corrib and Mask as a kid growing up. While he still fishes the Western Loughs, Mike's other great fly fishing love is Montana. He has fished the fly fishing spiritual home of America over a dozen times and has some incredible stories about hiking into the wilderness, catching trout to 10 pounds, and even fishing the famous Blackfoot River from a river runs through it. But Tom, before we hear from Mike, I could see the glint in your eye when he was describing the fishing over there.
Yeah, was it that evident, Tara? Yeah.
Oh yeah, you're
like... so. Oh, it was phenomenal, just to hear that, and to hear what he was saying, and describing the number of fish per mile in the Missouri River. But what really floated my boat was his story of the Bob Marshall Wilderness. And wow.
Yeah, it's funny because you think of Montana and like I'm thinking the ranches, the lodges, river runs through a kind of vibe. But yeah, he discovered this wilderness place which was kind of near the border, I think he said, with Canada, wasn't it? And there's only even a handful of guides who are allowed to actually guide in there.
Yeah, phenomenal. And then to hear, getting into it. And as I said to you, like as I asked before, and surely there's other ways of getting in. And he went, no.
Horseback, that's it.
Horseback, or you can trek. Some people do trek it, like, people have plenty of time and just put on the backpack and everything. Well, phenomenal. But not only that, he talks about all the other rivers there. I mean, I think Montana is a place that we all know. I mean, and we mentioned it there, the river runs through it, probably opened up a lot of people to Montana and the fishing industry when that came out with Brad Pitt in the 90s. But it's just, it's like the Western Loughs in Ireland. It's like, Patagonia and trout fishing. It's one of those places, it's a destination. It's, dare I say it, it's bucket list material.
Yeah. Although what was great talking to Mike about it, he's been there, I think he said 14, 15 times. He went every year between 2000 or something like that for 12 years or something. He was saying, like, it's just, obviously he didn't have kids at the time, does now, so it's curtailed his annual trips, but it's to be able to do that. So he's got some great insights, great information on it. Really kind of, people talk about New Zealand, but now I'm kind of leaning more towards Montana now, like, you've done New Zealand, of course. So
I've done New Zealand. I think you touched on it there when you were talking to him. You talked about the variety, and all the different types of stuff that is probably there. Now, the variety is good in New Zealand too, but, a lot of New Zealand is fishing for, let's say, the trophy trout, and targeting, not always. And, I'm doing a disservice there, but, it's renowned for very big fish and, chasing after these, spending time at them. Like, I know, like, it's interesting when he talks about the Missouri, about 7,500 fish per mile. Jesus. Like, I fished a river in New Zealand, and it was about, here's the thing, about one fish a kilometer.
My God.
But, and maybe there was more, but this is all we would see. That fish was probably double figure.
Yeah.
Right. So, and there's the difference between the two,
See, I think I prefer Montana, because if you mess up that cast.
And I did. I got to hold my hands up. That river, remember, saw him. And I didn't think I'd messed it up, actually. And even when I look back at it now, I just said, what did I do wrong with that cast? But anyway, I thought I covered him well, and he just fecked off. Not at a rate of knots, but he just fecked off.
Not having that.
So there's another kilometer for the next fish. And tried to actually, now that you mention it, I might be with you.
Because Mike was saying they were catching about 100 fish a day, was it, when they were doing the wilderness?
Yeah. That was phenomenal.
He said you could add 200 if you wanted to, hammer it, like, So
yeah. No, it was great to talk to him. Like, I've known Mike for a long time because he's been down here in Clonberne for years, So I remember from growing up and everything. But it was actually great as our first, my first. Well, I know you do the rugby podcast, but I've never done a rugby podcast before, so it's great.
Apologies to anyone who's not into rugby. We do get to fly fishing eventually, but somebody who's played for Connacht for 10 years, was a coach for them. He was the Warren Gatland was the coach after him at Connacht. So kind of some interesting stories.
Yeah, and he got to play against Warren Gatland.
Yes, and the All Blacks and all that stuff. You can't ignore it. So, but stick with it. If you're not into rugby, he's got some funny stories either way. So it's well worth it. Well worth it, especially when we get to Montana. But look, let's hear from Mike now. And I first asked him where his fly fishing story began.
Well, my grandfather actually had a place in Loch Mask, not far from Tom there, Spiders Bay. And then he had a place, he bought an old schoolhouse on the Upper Mask. And although I was never down there much with him, my mum was kind of keen on fishing, didn't do a lot, but I did the usual, got into fishing for perch with worms and spinning and all that kind of stuff. And then my mother got a gilly to bring me out one day that used to be on my granddad, and it kind of went from there. It used to dap a lot initially, I'd say, like a lot of people on Mask and Corrib, and then kind of later on, as I got a bit older, I got into the fly fishing. Also, when I used to go back to Delphi actually, and to a couple of priests that I knew, and they used to bring me back. And there's a family there called the McAvoys back. They have a house in Upper Mask, and used to a priest that stayed with them and fished for the month down in Delphi. And he was my priest in school in Dublin, as it happened to be. And he brought me back one day, and oh my God, it was just unbelievable. I think we got 30 keepable sea trout in the first day.
That's David's uncle, isn't it?
No, it was a friend of the father's. Yeah, it was a friend.
It was a friend of David's father.
Yeah. And the other priest used to stay in Kylemore and relieve the priest for Kylemore for a month, and they literally take a month on Dulac mostly and Finlock and Glencullen, and they'd fish for the month. I often thought, Jesus, it'd be great to be a priest. This is unreal.
Priest or a teacher.
Yeah, exactly. And the fishing, I've heard that the podcast, the fishing was just unbelievable. Like, it was just, I couldn't even describe it. It was that good. And this was back like sort of 79, 80, that kind, 8, 9, 8, that kind of time. I was only 14, 15 at the time.
You've lived and worked in Dublin all your life, is that right?
My parents moved to Galway actually when I was about 16. So we spent 2 or 3 months in Clonbur every year, and then it got to the stage where even if my parents weren't going, I went down and I stayed with a friend of mine, whose father was a gilly, Matty Somerville. Tom would know him as well. He used to bring, and I used to stay with them. Instead of going home, I was in boarding school. I might see my parents one end of the year to the other hardly at one stage.
You sound a bit like the way Tom, like you were at school and, obsessed with the fishing. It was kind of like you nearly couldn't wait till the summer holidays came along so you could be out the whole time. Was that the way you'd class it?
That was it. I used to come down before we lived there, and my mum might be down for 2 months of the summer, and there might be a month left or 3 weeks, and I wouldn't go home. I'd stay with that family. And when I think of the madness, like I used to go out on Loch Mask on my own as a 14 or 15-year-old with just a pair of oars, and you do a drift and you dap all the way down, and then you have to row all the way back up again. It was mad stuff. You wouldn't let your child do it in a million years today. I'd never heard of a life jacket like that. Just didn't even exist, I just get and pick grasshoppers. I'd hop on the bike, I'd have a dapping rod, I'd have a sandwich, and I'd have a jar of grasshoppers and a net. That was it.
And were you going out from Ross Hill? Yeah.
Yeah, I was going out from Ross Hill. Yeah.
Well, but it's true what you say. Like, I mean, you wouldn't, 14-year-olds, you wouldn't let them do that nowadays.
Oh, not in a million years. It was mental. It was absolute madness when I think about it. And the family I used to stay with, who was one of my close friends, Tom Somerville, he came back from England. Tom would be older than I am, and that was great because he was mad into the fish, and I had an adult that could use an engine, it was brilliant.
Tell me this, Mike, were you with friends or were you very much kind of one of the oddities that was so into the fishing?
I used to do a lot myself. I had a couple of friends, Seamus Kine, particularly in Clonbur, whose mother owns a fishing shop. But the problem was in Clonbur in those days, the 14 and 15-year-old, they all had to work, which was, I used to work on the farm with the Somervilles when I was staying with them. But they'd be trying to get them to get out of the shop. And Owen Burke, another friend of mine, God rest him, who was down there, died far too young. Trying to get them out was like they were brought up the kind of, when I said the hard way, I don't mean that in a bad way, but they had shops and pubs and stuff like that, and they were up early in the morning. So I just ended up going out my own, because there was no one around,
Now, did you disservice by claiming you were in Dublin all the time, and you kind of brushed over it there, but tell me about the rugby side of things.
Yeah, the rugby's great. I was lucky enough to play for Connacht for about 10 seasons, and I coached with them for another 3. And funny enough, I was in boarding school in Munster, and what actually happened to me, I played Munster schools back in 80-81, and Connacht actually, to be fair, wrote to me and asked me would I declare for Connacht when I left school, and I played kind of underage with Connacht, and then I was lucky enough, it was fantastic times, to be honest with you, to play with Connacht for about 10 seasons, and then I coached for another 3. I was really lucky there as well. I coached a year with Eddie O'Sullivan, 2 with Warren Gatland, and then Warren gave me the opportunity. I coached the Ireland A side for a year with Mike Ruddock, so I had a super run. I coached a couple of teams in Dublin, Lansdowne Wanderers, but I'm just really lucky in my rugby career. I describe myself as a journeyman, but I had a good head for it, So,
what position, Mike?
I played the centre mostly. I played nearly every game. I played 1 game at out half when Eric Elwood was injured, but other than that, I played them all. Look, rugby was like university to me. I saw the world. I played a couple of seasons in Australia, and made some lifelong friends in it, which rugby. It was. I think I got all my jobs nearly when I was younger. All my the chances through. When I go back and think, geez, if I didn't play rugby, God knows what I'd be doing now. So I was lucky, and we got a few good games in those times. We played the All Blacks, Australia, Samoa. Those are times when teams toured and played the provinces. So fantastic times for me, and I was incredibly lucky.
I was just looking at them. There's a bit of footage on the All Blacks game on YouTube, about 3 or 4 minutes, as much as I could get. And I remember when they came to Galway that day, because I was still in college in Galway at that time, and I didn't bother going to it. I was really sorry afterwards that I didn't. But it was some game. You went ahead that day, didn't you?
I think we did in the beginning, but it was oh man, it was about 10,000 people in the sports ground that day.
Yeah.
It was mad bananas.
What year was that?
89, and they were the world champions then, actually, funny enough. So they had a really good side. In fact, Warren Gatland was playing in that game, and as we reminisced, but it was I think it was 13-6 at half time, and we were dead at half time. It was like wave after wave after wave. And this is the fact, I touched the ball twice in the game, and one of the touches was Eric put up a Gary O, and I happened to get a hand to tap it back. And the other was I intercepted a pass just as they were about to score. And when I intercepted it, 3 of them hit me, took the ball off me, and then did score. So it was, and I came off the pitch, and I'm not joking you, I was never tireder, ever. I could hardly walk off the pitch. I'd say I made 40 tackles, which is like mental stuff. You're just getting up, down, up, down, up, down. And it was the second half, they just ran riot. It was a great experience,
Did you get to swap jerseys, Mike?
They would, not in those days,
No. Of course, amateur days, wasn't it?
Amateur days. Geez, you wouldn't even get a Connacht jersey at the end of the season. And they were like polystyrene type yokes, I gave Tomas Burke my jersey. They have a pub in Clonbur from the Australian game. And I still have my All Blacks jersey there somewhere.
Do you mind me actually just talking to you about the rugby for a while, because I think it's brilliant, that era. I co-wrote the book with Donald Lenihan, so I got real insights into 1980s rugby, and it was a bit of a Wild West, wasn't it? And forgive me for saying it, but I'd say it was a bit wilder in Connacht in the sports grounds as well, was it?
Jesus, it was like the sports ground, as I say, teams hated playing there. But I hated playing there too, no one likes it. It's actually, we played Australia in 93, and they were actually world champions. and there was hailstones that day, and it was savage, is all I can tell you. But about halfway through the game, I can't remember which way I got into, but David Campese came on, and I will never forget it. He was on the wing, and he was jogging on the spot for like the whole second half. He was flapping his arms around his body. And when we were having the dinner after, I was chatting to him, and he said, "Oh, mate, never fucking played anywhere as cold as my life." Excuse the language. And I could see he was totally miserable, like on the pitch. And I'd say, but it was brutal. That wind comes straight down the pitch, and as people used to say, it's an advantage. And I used to say, you tell me a rugby player who likes to play in the wind and the rain
every week.
Every week, yeah, every week. Well, thank God we were lucky, like that we were only playing. You only played like maybe 2 or 3 friendlies, and then 3 or 4 interpros, depending. At that stage, the exiles were in it as well.
That's right,
one part of it, but it was brutal.
When did you stop playing?
I stopped playing in the 94-95 season. To be fair to Eddie O'Sullivan, I'd been captain of Connacht then, and he said to me, "Look, do you fancy coming into the coaching?" And I had, my back was giving me a bit of trouble and stuff. So he said, "You can play next year or coach." And I thought, like, it never happened today, but who'd get into coaching into pro level straight off? So it gave me a great opportunity from that point of view. I was still playing club rugby, but I just played went in from there and started coaching, and then Warren Gatlin came in the next year, who was absolutely unbelievable, and kind of went from there. But I was working full time as well. It was very hard. Very hard. I had to make a choice then in the end. Do I go coaching professionally? Because I coached Lansdowne for 3 years. I did the Ireland A team, and within that time, and then it was kind of what way do you go? I had a couple of offers, but I had a good job, and so it's a deal that's too fickle.
Could you ever have envisaged, because remember those early days of the professional era, like where Irish rugby was so far behind, in terms of the structures and the setup of it. Could you ever have envisaged the way the game was develop in the coming years?
It was hard then, but to be fair, the guys who structured it in Ireland originally, Sid Miller, Ronnie Dawson, those guys, they did an unbelievable job. And people forget how they structured. And you can see UK are in tatters, even, Scotland, Wales, very weak rugby, club rugby. Like, they did an unbelievable job, those guys. And later on, the RFU nearly messed it up by trying to get rid of Connacht, actually, that time. And actually, that would have been a disaster, because it would have limited you, because that's what the other provinces the other countries have done. They've got fewer teams, and they don't have the rugby population.
But isn't it? And Tom, I know you're a massive Connacht rugby fan as well. Like
season ticket holder.
When you think about it, like in terms of the names you mentioned there, Eric Elwood, Warren Gatland, Eddie O'Sullivan, like the amount of people, and now you've got Mac Hansen, Bundy Aki, like the amount of people who cut their teeth there.
Even in those days, you got to remember, Simon Gagan got his captain of Connacht, Jim Staples and David Curtis, 3 guys that I played in the backline. It was the best kind of backline I'd say there ever was. Eric had out half. I was probably the weak link, but unbelievable team. Guys like Noel Mannion, who was a supreme athlete. Like, Noel played in an All Ireland semi-final for Galway. I mean, Noel was before his time, to be honest with you. We went to Australia, myself and Noel, and played there. They reckoned he'd had, in those days, 30 or 40 caps for Australia, as well as being, probably a brilliant rules player. He was just awesome, but he was a bit before his time. He was so good on the ball skills and stuff like that. And, those days, to get in the Irish team, you needed to be, as a forward, not seen nearly, that kind of way. But he was a gifted rugby player. But there was Tom Clancy. There was a lot of good players and a lot of brilliant players who actually didn't get capped, but were brilliant. And one I call out is Robbie Henshaw's uncle Davy, who was a prop. He played the same 10 years that I did. Like, he was other than injured, he was there. I'd be very close with Robbie because of that. And his dad Tony came on a tour with us to Lourdes, and we became lifelong friends. But there were some really super players in that time,
And did Connacht, do you think, and does it still to this day revel in that kind of underdog, we're the unwanted province here kind of vibe?
I would say a bit, to be honest with you. You would hope today not so much. We used to, and funny enough, like I played for I think 9, 10 seasons. I was really lucky. Only injury wise and selection wise, I only missed one inter-pro. But we played Leinster 4 times in my time in Galway, and I only lost to them once.
Right. Wow.
Yeah. And that was really by a point. And it was actually in Corinthians because the sports ground, unfortunately, we couldn't get them in the sports ground because it was frozen or something. So the only time I lost it was, I never lost in the sports ground. So it was interesting. Yeah, but I think there's a bit of that, but that can be a problem as well.
Well, I'm trying to think there when those 10 years, were Leinster the strongest inter-pro team?
No,
I can't really remember. Was Munster?
Ulster, 10 in a row.
Yeah, because the one
would you believe, in fact, we were the first team. We drew 10-all with them in the sports ground, and that was the first time in whatever the 9 or 10 years that they hadn't won a game. We should have won it actually, but we had 14 men and we had an injury at the time.
Yeah, it's funny when you mentioned that. The first ever game I was at the sports ground, Ulster, back it was the end of the 90s or mid 90s, and Ulster, I think they put up 40 points against Connacht. They were just awesome.
They were a very good side. But in the 80s, they were even, the 80s they were even better. The 80s to the early 90s, like they had Carr, Matthews, or like they had the team full of internationals, team full of internationals.
One final question on rugby before we better start talking about fly fishing.
Rugby podcast. We've branched out to the rugby. People are going to be listening to this go, what the hell?
I've tuned into the wrong show.
Yeah.
Tell us, give us a highlight from your time playing and or coaching. Like a game or two that stands out, apart from the All Blacks. You mentioned the All Blacks, but like in terms of victories or...
Yeah, for Connacht too, I saw it was my second game for Connacht. We played Munster, who were seriously good. I mean, you talked about Donald Lennon, and we played them in Thomond Park, and we were beaten the previous week. It was my first cap. We were beaten 40 points to 6 by Ulster. Went down to Thomond Park, and we beat them 11-9, and we scored in the last play of the game. And I was involved in the move 3 times myself. I had the ball 3 times myself, and I was only a young fella, and there was guys in it, like there was a famous, brilliant rugby player called John O'Driscoll. I think he's the incoming president of the RFU. John O'Driscoll played for the Lions. He was a back rower, 6. Some of you younger listen probably, but Google him. He was as hard as nails, and he was nearly in tears after the first game I think he'd ever interroged won with Connacht. He was like an outstanding player, and so that was one. And the other game probably we played. The last game to play Leinster, and again we were losing with they scored with a minute to go, and probably because I was involved myself, we didn't. I'd say the last minute injury time, we made a break in the middle of the pitch, and went on, gave the pass in, and we scored. And it's just that euphoria of those ones. It's probably the ones that when you win them, or it's the same when you lose them in the last minute. They're the most devastating ones. But not that I often made a break. Don't get me wrong. I didn't have the pace, but I did that day. Mind you, it was only. It was Shane Byrne I took on the outside, so you don't get a lot of credit for taking Shane Byrne on the outside. Really.
His hair was holding him back,
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, we'll do the bonus episode for rugby podcast fans, maybe.
Yeah, I have a rugby legend that no one ever heard of because he wasn't legend.
Brilliant to hear though. Like it's fellas like yourself who've had such careers, you know what I mean, that go under the spotlight, like in many respects as well. But come here, so when you were playing, were you doing fly fishing as well? Did you keep it up during the career?
I funny enough that you mentioned that in the mid to 80s, early 90s, I did hardly any is the answer. And then when I started to went back into it, remember the rod license came up, Tom, you'll know the year of that, because I remember I was kind of all said, right, I'm getting back into this, because you were training summers and all that kind of stuff when you were in the rugby. Like you'd have a program from Connacht, like for 3 or 4 days a week, trying just to get into it. And then in the 90s, I really got back into it and kind of went from there.
And so you were still in Connacht, living in Galway at that stage, was it?
No, I was living in Dublin always when I played for Connacht. Yeah, I came to Dublin from school, if you know what I mean, but I played for Connacht. My parents lived there, I did.
So were you commuting actually? Sorry, just going up and down for training?
Yes, I was. For coaching, playing, it was mad stuff. Yeah.
That's like, I remember doing an interview with Cyril Farrell even back in the day, and he was based in Dublin when he was training that Galway All-Ireland winning team in the 80s, like. And the commitment, like, and obviously the same for yourself, like you'd be up and down, 3-4 times a week, and this was before the motorway. Like.
And this is I was just going to say that pre-motorway, so you knew the inside of Kilbeggan, Moat, Rochford Bridge. Yeah,
Tom, I have tears in my eyes thinking about it. Jeez.
You knew every chipper in Lochbray.
Yeah,
because you'd just be looking into them. Yeah.
Oh.
And no wonder you didn't have any time for fishing.
but that was the thing, you know. You were exactly about that. And sometimes you train at loan and stuff like that. But I'm laughing when you say chipper. I'm going way out here. If you want to hear a very funny story, but you and it doesn't involve me. But I played Wonders with one of the most enjoyable players I ever played was Gary Halpin. Unfortunately, died a couple of years ago. You might have seen, but Halpin was just the funniest bloke I've ever met. And he was telling me we used to train in Tullamore sometimes. You go into Supermax afterwards, and I was saying that to him one day, and he was saying the Irish team trained there one day, and they went in. And they were training. They were overnight, and they sneaked out himself and Claw and Poppy into Supermax, which they weren't meant to do, obviously, Neil Francis. And so they were in there, and a local fella came in, an older man, half Scotter, didn't know who they were, and he looked at them and he goes, "Jesus, lads," he says, "you look like big rugby men, no G, the rugby men." So the lads thought this was hilarious, and Halpo would come back, and you'd be in the middle of a game, and he'd go on, "Cozzy," he's going me, and he'd go on, "You know what, Cozzy?" And I'd go, "What? You're just a big rugby man," he said to me. But the purpose of the story was they were playing, they were on an All Blacks tour that year, and it didn't go well for them. I think they went well in the first test, and then they got absolutely annihilated. I think they were playing Bay of Plenty, and the Wednesday team on those tours generally called, excuse the language, the fuck'ems, because fuck them, they're not playing in the first team, and they were being beaten by something like 50 points by Bay of Plenty, and I think the try was still 4 points. I have a funny feeling Neil France might have captain, but I can't remember who was. But anyway, when the last try came in, they were in under the sticks, and the captain calls everyone in, the usual, "For F's sake, lads, what's going wrong here?" And Halpo just looks up at them all and goes, I know. And they all just kind of stopped and looked at him and said, "What?" He said, I know what's going on. He says, "What?" "They're all just big rugby men," he said. And I think there's a video of it. They're actually shaking in the huddle with laughter of the whole thing. So sorry for digressing again, but when you mention Supermax in Tullamore, it's all I could think of.
Rugby men.
All big rugby men. Some characters.
Right, back to the fishing.
Back to the fishing.
We've digressed.
This is the worst podcast you've ever done.
It's the funniest. We'll
get to fishing at some stage.
Say it was funny, but we lost all our listeners.
So where were we? Oh yes. So you're okay. So you're in Dublin. You've retired from rugby. You've refound fishing. So were you heading back west all the time, kind of when you could?
Heading back west all the time, and I'd go down for the Mayfly, I'd take 2 weeks off religiously for the Mayfly. I'd beg some friend to put me up, either Seamus Kyne's mother or Brendan Lynch, who owns a supermarket, Clonborough. It was great to me, and myself and Tom Summer, we'd fish 2 weeks, and then in 2000 I said, geez, I woke up one morning, one of those things, said, geez, I can't be doing this. And I literally woke up one morning and said, I'm going to buy a house down there. And I'm going to try and squeeze a bit of money, borrow a bit of money. And I got it. The following week, I went and looked at a number of houses. And the first house I saw, I bought, it's on a small lake called Loch Nafooey, which but it looks over Loch Mask on one side and straight onto Loch Nafooey at the others. And I bought it at probably a goodish time, 2000, wasn't bad,
Fabulous. So did that mean you were going down fishing all the time then?
Well, whenever I could get away, I did a lot more fishing, let me put it that way, than I had been heretofore.
I suppose when you buy a house, you've made the commitments. There's no backing out. It's kind of the best way. No,
that's it.
Yeah.
I loved it down there. I spent all my childhood there, to be honest. Even my school breaks, everything, when we were in Dublin, I just didn't want to be anywhere else. And just the whole lifestyle, and I envy Tom there, and nobody's looking out at this morning. And anyway,
were you never tempted to? Because obviously I know work and all that is usually in the cities, whether it's Dublin or wherever. Were you ever tempted to try and make the move full time?
I wasn't. Look, I don't be sorry, but on this kind of stuff, the job I had and kind of thing, it was hard to do that, to replace that, and you could say lifestyle, and maybe looking back, yeah, lifestyle, it would have been a thing, but it was just the way it was. And because I was so far the rugby, even up to 2003, 4, I was still coaching, there was no, you weren't even thinking that way. I wasn't anyway. And then, life just takes over,
Yeah.
But something I'm going to say, and quite often this happens, Mike, and you get more fishing done sometimes when you're not living in a place. And if you're here working, suddenly, at least when you come down for your set breaks, you'll fish. Even if you're coming down for a weekend. But I know it here, and you say, I'm looking out over the lake. Yeah, but between me and the lake, there's jobs to be done. There's always jobs to be done in your own place, So at least when you have a set time, you're going down to Clonbur or coming down and you're going to go fishing, and that's it. So, I'm just trying to give you the good points.
You're right, but funny enough, you're 100% right, because now that I have a house, there's jobs to be done in the
house. Yeah,
and,
seriously.
Cutting the grass, the hedges, and I have two lovely kids. They'll be 7 and 9 this minute in a week's time, but that keeps you much busier, than I used to. I'm a slightly older father, so I did a lot of fishing in the years before I had kids, but it kind of brings it back a little bit,
Have you found it's tailed off since the kids have come along?
Well, I'm sure you can answer that question as well as I can. But
it's tough juggling.
I'm just trying to get old enough to see, can I get a bit of real interest in it? Then I have another excuse.
Yeah, exactly. It's a bit like the football matches. You bring the kids along,
Absolutely. Yeah,
exactly. So tell us, how did Montana come onto the radar?
Yeah, really, a friend of mine actually invited me to go. He actually had a house over up near town there. He was looking over the Corrib there, and he invited me. I'd done him a few favors and various things, and he invited me to go over. And we went over in 2001. Remember, it was just about 2 weeks after 9/11. It was an absolute nightmare, and airports wise and that, But he had met a guy in Chile who was an outfitter in Montana, and he had been running a lodge down there for the winter because the guy who owned the lodge, I think, had died. And he said, "Look, if you like dry fly fishing stuff, you've got to come to Montana." So he said to me, and I always had a graw about Montana, didn't know anything about it. And 2001 was the first time I went there, and that was a love affair that was never to leave. And the two of us went for a few years together, and we did 1 year in Alaska, and that was okay. I enjoyed it, but it was heavy fishing, to be honest with you. It was kind of fly fishing, a lot of, where you're getting down with eggs and they're losing weights and stuff. That wasn't that enjoyable. It was like, the whole experience was fantastic. It was one of those ones where you flew, into the wilderness by plane. They dropped you on the side of a river, literally landed on the stones on the side of the river, and off you went for 8 days. But it was a brilliant experience for the fishing. I was saying, I enjoyed the actual fishing more in Montana. The following year we were due to go back, and the day before we were due to go back, he cried off, couldn't believe it, and I went myself. Then it was a costly one, but the guy, Gary Fritz, who's the guy who went to on that trip, I introduced him to playing golf, and he became a fanatic. And he, every year afterwards, he invited me over, free gratis, stayed with him, and fish and play golf for 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks every year up until my first child was born in 2013. And would you believe, in 2015, they found him dead on the 11th hole in his local golf course. He died of a heart attack, but he loved it. But he was a fanatic, and he was, without doubt, the best fisherman, the best guide. And I've been with a number in Montana and other places, but he took golf as the worst game for him because he was a perfectionist. So he'd lose the plot over him. But every year you'd come back, he'd have found different ways of fishing, different places, different. I was just so lucky again. I really looked about my rugby career and stuff. I was just so lucky to met this guy, and it was because I couldn't have afforded really to do it on my own. It's an expensive one to do on your own every year, and then it was just, when can you get over? Bring your golf clubs type of thing.
If you're a fly tyer or want to get into fly tying, then this is for you. Ireland on the Fly have teamed up with Fulling Mill to give away a box of fly tying materials with free shipping to one lucky listener each week.
With more than 1,400 products to choose from, each perfectly packed by hand, their new range of fly tying material warrants closer inspection. Anyone wanting to see them in person and handle them could do well to get along to the Irish Fly Fair in Enniskillen, County Fermanagh, of which Fulling Mill is one of the sponsors. Held over next weekend, the 18th and 19th of November, they can not only see these materials being put to masterful use by the likes of Jackie Mahan, but they can stock up from Fulling Mill dealers, Shane Rogers of Rogers Tackle, who will be laden with all the new stock at the show. I hope to be there myself on the Saturday, so hopefully I might get to see a few of our listeners there.
From dozens of exciting new dubbings, chenilles, yarns and wools to perfectly prepared and packaged marabou, zonkers, deer belly and bucktail, the range is going down a storm, and this week's top mover is their new Eco Warrior dub, so be sure to check it out. And to be in with a chance of winning the £50 worth of materials, just answer the following question.
How many times did Mike Cosgrave touch the ball when playing rugby against the All Blacks?
Hint, it wasn't that many.
Email your answer to info@irelandonthefly.com and we will announce the winner on next week's show.
And congrats to Conor McFadden, who is the latest winner. Conor will be in touch.
And when you went with Gary, would you go all over Montana? And Montana's huge.
So getting into the detail of it, so people that might interest, Gary lived on the Missouri, which is without doubt the best fishing river in Montana. They'll talk about the Yellowstone, they'll talk about the Madison, they'll talk about, and I fished them all. I fished 13 or 14 rivers with Gary, but he lived on the Missouri, and the Missouri, when I went over first, it had 5,500 trout per mile. It has now got 7,500 trout per mile.
Wow.
It is the mighty moe, they call it. And funny enough, it doesn't always come up. They kind of look at the kind of, those other freestone rivers. But the Missouri is unbelievable. The problem is it's got very busy. I was very lucky. Actually, if people are thinking of doing it, if anyone wanted to contact me, stuff, I have no problem with that. But this is the time of the year. I used to go over in October every year. Summer's a bit mad, but I used to go in October, and if you want to fish nymphs and bobbers and stuff, you'll get loads of fish. But I prefer fishing dries when the opportunity comes, and streamers, super streamer fishing there as well.
Yeah,
unbelievable streamer fishing. So that to me was that the Missouri was like unbelievable, and I got it in days. I was lucky, or fantastic. And just to mention one, there's a place on it. I came one year, and he had said there's a place called Land of the Giants on the Missouri. It's below a dam and above a man-made lake that Missouri flows through, and you need a boat license engine. Once you're on an engine, you got to have a license to go up there. And he had found this place called the Land of Giants. Well, lads, I'll tell you, if you think you fish for big trout and places, this place was unbelievable. Like, just the size of the fish, and even the lake where we used to go out from. And one small story, if you'd like it, but I remember we went out one on the lake one morning, and we were a little bit late on it, which is unusual. And he said, "Look, I was out a few days. There's trout in the lake before we go up the river." We went over to the side, and when the two of us would be fishing, one of us would take the boat and one of us would be casting. And I'm not joking, we went over to the corner side of the lake. There was a weed bank. And I would say, and people say he's talking absolute shite, but I would say in the hour and a half, because we got bored, I would say we had over between 60 and 70 fish, of which I wouldn't say 10 of them were under 3 pounds. And just, I know it was mental. It was mental. I know it sounds like completely unrealistic, but I promise you, I remember like I had a fish. We were basically catching the fish every cast, more or less. And to say, because they were on streamers, he was really protective for the fish. He'd get them in quickly. And I cast out at one stage. I had one on, and he was going, crank on it, as they always say, so you get in quickly. And the streamer came out of its mouth as I had it full tilt, nearly took the head off me, and I had to duck out of the way. and it landed the other side, and I gave it one strip, and I had a fish the other side of the boat. That is a fact. And he said to me, we went down and we fished in the evening for a little bit and caught a fish. And he said to me, as I was leaving, you got a fish in your first cast and your last cast today. We actually went up the river then, and we didn't even bother, with it anymore, because it was just shooting fish in a barrel. But the quality of the fish, the size. Now, I believe, there's a guy that I know who's a very good guide on it, and I believe it's got so busy now that he kind of tries to avoid it. But this time of the year would be your best chance. But the fish, I don't know what the feeding was on it. It was just because actually that thing crank on it, he lost me my biggest fish. I had a brown on. It must have been 10 pounds. And he kept going, you're not cranking on it, you're not cranking on it. And it was in a fast part of the river. And the fish turned and just smashed everything on it. And he just looked at me and said, sorry about that. He said, that was the biggest fish you've ever got here. And I didn't get one bigger subsequently.
Sounds incredible.
That was it was like, as I say, I fished the Spring Creeks, I fished the Madison, Madison's a fantastic river. They call it the 50-mile riffle. It's just flows for 50 miles, Freestone River.
Yeah. Actually, Mike, you often hear this Freestone River. What's a Freestone River?
Well, Freestone River is rivers that flow from the snowmelt, basically.
Right.
Yeah, the Missouri is a load of rivers flowing into it, and all that kind of stuff. But they are just straight from it. That's the trip I did. I hadn't been back since 2013. That's the trip I did this year, was to free. What the main part of it was to the South Fork of the Flathead, which was in a wilderness trip, which was one I had been on my mind for years. And if I have time, I'll tell you how I found out about it and how I ended up doing it. And if I don't, tell me to get lost.
Oh no, because you've told me a little bit about it when I was chatting to you. I'm dying to hear the full story of it. And actually, it sounded absolutely amazing.
Before we just get into, could you maybe just paint the picture for people? Montana, we're talking west, north. We're on the border with Canada there, aren't we? And the size of the place, is it just
size of the place? Yeah, well, just to give you an idea of it, it's 3.5 times the size of Ireland, roughly. And it currently now they think it's got slightly overpopulated now, with just over 1 million people. There was under 1 million people for a lot of years, because things like a lot of money has gone there. But really interesting thing about that, which I actually only learned this year when I was over there, was 92% of the land is owned by the government.
Oh wow!
So of course, Yellowstone National Park, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, Glacier National Park, but everywhere is like it's just unbelievable. It's divided by the Rockies, so one half of it is like old Indian, you always see in the westerns, and the other half is more that Rockies type. One of the lovely rivers to fish is the great one from a river runs through it, which is the Blackfoot. Beautiful river, like absolutely.
Did you fish that?
Oh, we used to have a thing where we'd watch the movie when we were over there and fishing every year. In fact,
that's like going to Kong and watching The Quiet Man.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Sorry.
You're right, and Tom, when there's visitors there, they have to do that. And it's like, oh man, again. But actually, funny enough, that's actually how I ended up here in some ways about this trip. The way really mad things happen here sometimes. Like, we were going out when my friend and myself were still going over together. We were going out fishing one day, and he was a terrible man for being late, and he'd be doing a bit of call to make here an email. And we ended up going out, and we were going on the Missouri, and Gary was busy that day, so we were going with another guy, and we didn't get out till 11 o'clock, which is like 2 hours after you'd normally be out, 2.5 hours. And there's a million places to go out. So normally you'd be on your own. And this car, when we were heading out, pulled in behind us. And an older man and a younger man got out. And my mate, Enda, says to me, Jesus, he says to me, Cosy, I know the older guy there. And I said, you do? And you know what you mean? Yeah. As if in the middle of Montana. He says, no, I do. And he had been on a trip to Cuba some years beforehand. And he said, he was on the trip, and he said, I even remember his name. He had a really cool name. Bud Hunter was his name. So I said, yeah, all right, well, let's go up. Geez, he wasn't within 10 yards of your man, and your man goes, the Irish guy. I hadn't a clue his name, the Irish guy. But incredibly, would you believe, he said to me, "You've got to come down to our place." He had a house on his friend's ranch, on his friend's summer 60-acre holiday home, and he had a house on it. And it happened to be in a place called Ovando, where we would go to fish the Blackfoot. And we were actually going on the Friday down to Ovando to fish the Blackfoot. Now, Montana is huge now. Ovando is a town, it's like going back to the 1870s. There's a hardware shop, and then there's a kind of a cafe and a fishing shop all in one. And it's all wood, you know, the wooden walks that they see the cowboys come down. There's nothing in it. And that's where your man's. And he says, "Come down on Thursday." He says, "Come, stay, bring your guide, stay with us." We went down, stayed in the ranch. We had elk for dinner, and they had this. His friend had about 20 miles of the stream that ran into the Blackfoot. It was called Montour Creek. It was full of fish, but we went down. We fished for the day with him and two boats. We had some laugh. And every year after that, my friend never got back, but I went back every year and stayed a couple of nights with them, fished their river. In fact, I even went fishing up to a place with the guy who owned the ranch and our friend Bud Hunter. And they were like grumpy old men. They were two older fellas. And the guy who owned the ranch, a guy called Ralph Buchanel, he, as Bud said, he's so much money, he doesn't know how much money he had. He owned a private bank, which he sold in Carolina, and his mother was one of the, like, say it was Smith Klein Beecham, and she was a Smith or whatever, but he was the nicest, most down-to-earth bloke you ever met. No bullshit at all. Like, this massive ranch was it's just beautiful. But the reason I'm telling you that was, Bud, when I went down to it, we were talking, and I went down and spent time with him like every year. And he said to me, he said, when I was younger, I used to go into the wilderness, which borders Montana and Canada. It's called the Bob Marshall Wilderness. He said he used to go in for 2 weeks on horseback with a guide, no one in there, and we'd fish down it. So it was always in my head, this Bob Marshall Wilderness. So about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I was coming up to a decent birthday, and my wife was giving me a bit of a pass. I started looking this up, where to fish it, how to fish it, could go into the wilderness. And I was looking up loads of sites and stuff like that, and there was a few people that did it. Would you believe there was an American family 2 doors up from me, she's a big job in Europe, and the husband, who actually played for the Buffalo Bills, would you believe, he's a lawyer, they had a house at Whitefish, Montana. We'd be chatting about Montana. I just happened to say, look, any idea, would you know, who would be good at going for a trip into the wilderness, because it's a particular thing. And he said, yeah, my guide, I think, does that for somebody. And he gave me this guy named called Mark Evans. He gave me the name. He said, these are the best guys to do. It was a place called Montana Wilderness Lodge. And I rang your man, and he was kind of third generation Irish as well. Rich McAtee was his name, same as McNT. They're all similar. And I put a few guys together, a mate of mine, a good friend of mine from Galway, Mac and Keane, who fished a lot in the Corrib, who Tom would know. He's an oncologist in Galway. And my cousin, who lives next door to me, who they have placed down up the road, he's a doctor. He literally moved next door by chance. And a friend of mine across the road called Rory Burgess, who's in the pub and business. They all do fish, and I go with Rory down to fish a lot down in Tipperary and Andy Ryan and stuff like that. So they all agreed to go. So we spent a year kind of planning it, and I went over a little bit early, funny, with Mackin, and we fished a few rivers in Missoula, well-known rivers. We fished the Blackfoot, and we fished the Clark Fork and the Bitterroot, which are kind of well-known rivers. But this trip was an 8-day trip. You went up to the lodge, stayed the night, and then you went in on horseback for 2 days. You were 2 days on horseback, and it was... So you have about 7 hours the first day, and then you fish in the evening, you camp, and then you went in the second day and got to your main camp after about sort of 6 hours. So it was tough enough now going in, but it was amazing. I mean, there's nothing, there's your no phones, you're none of that. The satellite phone for emergencies. Like, other than that, amazing. You're into the wilderness, and then you come down for the next 5-6 days, and you fish. That's the South Fork of the Flathead is all native Montana trout, which are cutthroats and bull trout and whitefish. And you fish most of the other rivers, like the Blackfoot has all of them. Actually, it is rainbows, cutthroat, cutbows, which is a mixture between the two, bull trout, white trout. That's the Grand Slam, as they call it, and brown trout. But this only has native Montana trout, and it was. I fished. You could fish kind of hopper dropper stuff. I fished dry fly nearly the whole time. It was unbelievable. We were talking 100 fish a day. Now, from sort of cutthroats in that river, 2.5 pounds, probably the biggest one you get. But just seeing them, the bull trout go to 10, 12. Mackin got one, I lost two, but you're fishing streamers for those. But it was just, it was the whole experience, the horse riding, the camping at night. It was unreal. Like it was the lads were, I was just saying, trip of a lifetime. It was. They bring all the stuff in, the rafts, the tents. There's a line. It's like, honestly, going back in time. They have a line of mules. They bring 6 or 7 mules. They bring all the way in, they set up the camp, and then they leave you. There's a guide for every two, and then there's someone who manages the camp and a camp hand, and they pack up every morning and they meet you down at the next point. Sometimes you stay 2 nights in one area and you go up and down the river, but just like, I couldn't even describe it. It was like heaven on earth,
Sound amazing. And I remember because you were telling me a little bit about it beforehand, Mike, and the first thing I said to you was, yeah, but surely a 4x4 can get in as well.
Yeah.
And you said, no.
You don't even see helicopters dropping stuff in, actually. It's fairly dense. There's been a lot of that Montana, a huge amount of forest fires and stuff like that. Some people pay people to bring their stuff in and they hike it in, you know what I mean? There's a good number. Yeah. They're great for outdoors in Montana. Like everyone can do outdoors in Montana.
Yeah.
Everyone can fix everything. It's like the old days, but amazing. You get in, even the crack at night, the whole laugh. We were lucky. The lads with a good crack. Rory's my mate here, is a fucking hilarious bloke, and they just thought it was the best trip they were ever on. And there was a couple on it, actually. The American couple, they were in their 70s, believe it or not. It was tough for them now, but they thought that, because the Irish guys were taking the mickey out of each other for the whole trip, that it was the best trip ever.
Come here, how proficient did you have to be as a horse rider?
Not at all, really, Yeah, just you want to get your arse in gear before you literally. I was going to the gym with the biggest saddle on the bike, and I was going on and sitting this. And funny enough, it was more my knees and my feet that were sore, But
yeah.
I was nearly going to say a phrase that my great friend Tom Somerville, I may as well, but anyway, you might want to blank it out. Yeah. You could have an arse like a flute player's lips after it, or a hole like a flute player's lips after a break.
Proper wilderness, like, my God, wilderness.
Proper wilderness. It is the wilderness that divides the two. And actually, funny enough, we were lucky. Myself and Mackin went a few days early and fished some rivers, but incredibly hot at the time. We went in July, and because you can only do this trip kind of in July and August, they are the times. And there are only certain people who are, I think there's only 3 from where you went that are allowed guide in that particular area.
Right.
But so when we were in Missoula, myself and Mackin, we fished a bit of route and stuff like that, and we had to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and they'd go up as high as they could, so the water was cooler, because come afternoon it was so hot, the fish there'd be no fishing. But when we went up there, because that's higher, it was all day, every day. It was like literally you could have caught 200 fish in a day if you wanted, nearly. Do you know what I mean? Certainly if you're relatively proficient, at it. Because, at night time I'd come in and you'd relax and have the crack. You could go out and fish for another 2 hours, you know what I mean, if you wanted, and get up at 6 o'clock in the morning if you wanted, But we had so much fishing during the day, to be fair. It was the crack was as much part of it. It was just, I would say, it was just the whole experience, to be honest with you. It was just totally different. Than, like, Montana's brilliant rivers, all that kind of stuff, and you'll get loads of fish. And anyone who's really into fishing, like, summer's good for the dry fly as well. But I'd say that the most prolific day I ever saw was on the Missouri, and it was snowing. and they had a hatchet Betis, or like not even good at the thing. And as guys said, I'd say every fish in the river was rising. It was like bananas. And when I say rising, when you're fishing particularly things like the Missouri, when the fish are rising, what you're doing is you drift down a boat and you'd see them rising. There could be like 20, 30, 40, 50 fish rising on the same riffle, just non-stop, like just taking, on that type of time. Certainly tend to feel, the big ones tend to get at the top. It is pretty precise fishing that one now, because you got to get your drift right, all that type of stuff, especially a dry fly, you're mending. And you're not in a lot of states when you're in those drift boats. The guys will, if you're not proficient, will drift with you in the boat. But if you're stopping to drift those ones, you've got your dry fly fishing downstream. So you're mending, you're unmending, you're all those things. And even when you're drifting the boat, you're doing that. Even with nymphs and bobber fishing, as they call it, with floats, you have to get the drift right. But you learn so much. For anyone who river fishes, there's lots obviously very proficient. But you go to Montana, I'll tell you, you'll be coming back. And I would still say I'm not great, but like you're coming back far better. You're doing it every day, and they're telling you, mend right, mend left, then left slack. It's nonstop. Like especially if you get a good guide.
Yeah, it sharpens you.
Ruins you in some respects. And I was complete gobshite when I went first time. You know what I mean? I say your man was looking at me going, these are going to be a long 2 weeks with these guys.
Is it expensive? Is it, or I know you can obviously find as expensive as you want, but
it's not like you're talking. If there's two of you going, like for a guiding day, you're talking. Tom, close your ears here before you get ill. But you're talking about.
You don't think I Google these things?
Yeah, you're talking about. Now you're talking about sort of $500 a day, ish. Without the tip, by the way. So you're $250. So if you were to go for 10 days for fishing, you're talking about 2.5, 3. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff. So if you wanted to fly out there is cheap. I saw flights. Actually, I didn't take them at time. I got the cheap off to Montana. Last Christmas, I didn't book them in time. €650 return. That was to Seattle and on to Montana. So that bit isn't particularly expensive for the length of time, the distance you're going. And then accommodation varies. Accommodation in America's got expensive, I have to say. Like before, you get accommodation for nothing. Accommodation is not cheap. But if I was going and doing it, I wouldn't be going. I go for cheap enough accommodation wherever you're going, because you're not in it. You know what I mean? Yeah. You're in it day now. So it depends where you're going. But it's some really. But it probably costs you if you're doing a kind of a one-off trip of a lifetime, you probably put $6 or $7 away for the trip. Do you know what I mean? Like, and that's what you do. But like, it's. You want to be going with someone as well to do that way. But the fishing itself, like $250 a day, that's about 220 Irish, or do you know what I mean? Like that's what it is. You get your lunch, you get your whatever, and they give you all the flies and everything. Like they give you everything basically, and they couldn't be more helpful. Like they just literally, the really good guys, they'll change up again. They'll bring a load of rods themselves. And as I say, if people are interested or it comes back to you, on the Missouri and some other, I do have some very good contacts in some of those places, just by surely being there. There's the place called Headhunters, a guy called Mark Reisler has Craig, Montana is actually kind of the Mecca. It's on the Missouri. If you ever look, there's 3 fly shops in it. That will tell you how good it is. And there's nothing else bar a bar, which is a kind of a restaurant. Other than that, there's nothing in it. 3 fly shops. But as I say, timing it's very busy during the summer. Like, it'd be great hopper fish and stuff like that. I'm saying put the people off. But if you got the time at this time of the year, it calms down and the fishing can be terrific.
What time does the season end at there?
It doesn't. In a lot of rivers,
right through. Yeah.
It's open. It doesn't in a lot of rivers anyway. Not all, but it does. There's fishing all the way through. But obviously, Montana's one of those that gets cold in the winter, and the bigger snowfall they have, the better fishing generally is the following year because it washes out the rivers and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's like that. And fantastic wildlife as well, particularly on the Missouri. Your eagles all over you, ospreys, deer, elk, unbelievable.
And then just the trip into the Bob Marshall Wilderness Complex, was that more expensive?
The way I did it, there's a couple of ways you can do it. We did it so you were rafting and going to different places, but you can do it when it's not rafting. And actually, funny enough, that it was about your man gave us a discount because it was 4, but it cost about $7,000 is what it was. You know, it was a lot of saving it. But I was looking up, you could do the Wade, it on Wade, which is probably equally as good, to be honest. I'm not saying we'll go crack on it. And I think that was like $3,500-4,000 for 6 days or something like that. So that wasn't bad. It was per two. It wasn't bad. You can look at a few different things there. We ended up doing this one because it was that was going to be a trip. I wouldn't do one, to be honest, it's expensive again. But there's other guided trips. A lovely one on the Smith River. Smith River is beautiful. It's another river. And funny enough, you said, Tom, Heaven on Earth. There's a ranch in the Smith River called Heaven on Earth that you can go to. And it's got a little 9-hole golf course on it. And it is absolutely amazing. You can go and fish for the day on it. I did it once with Gary. And the guy who ran it, it's where he was like living in the wilderness. He used to feed bears out of his back door. The wildlife and game used to be coming down with guns, threatening him nearly for feeding bears. He was a gas ticket, and but it was gorgeous. So many gorgeous places in it. You know, you could do a very nice trip there though, and fish a number of the rivers and spring creeks. And if you were going to do a big trip, save up. That's the place for me to go. And I know people of New Zealand, but New Zealand very specific fishing. Tom better than I do, sight fish and all that kind of stuff. But if you for sheer enjoyment and size and stuff like that, it's unbelievable.
You've sold it, I tell you. Mike, but I think for people, isn't it the sheer choice? It can be a bit overwhelming maybe because the size of it, there's so many rivers. Where do you go? Where do you start? I suppose, look, just start doing your own digging and doing your own research,
Yeah, as I say, but, you won't go wrong with fishing in Missouri. There's just, it's like 7,500 fish per mile. Just think about it. It's and they thought it was brilliant when it was 5,500. And in the period in the 2000s, it dropped down to 3,500, and they were going, Jesus, the fishing is getting, you know what I mean? And now it's up to, I only heard it was there 7,500, but it was July. We could have gone over there, but if I gone over there, I said, look, it's just it's mental busy. But if I was going this time of the year, that's where I go without fail.
So how many trips have you made over?
I would say 14.
Wow, so pretty much nearly every other year kind of for the last 20 years.
Well, I was going every year from 2001 and to 2013. And I went twice one year because my lovely wife, who was my girlfriend then, and her sister had done a trip along the West Coast. And I met them in Seattle, and I hired a car and I said, I'll bring you over. I brought them over to the ranch and over to Gary. And we fished with Gary for 2 days, and they did. My wife, to be fair, is quite good at fishing, and but not much fly fishing. But her sister had never done it, and we went up to that place to line the John. She was pulling in 3 or 4 pound trout, and he was trying to tell her, "Look, this isn't normal. This is like the best in the world." He's saying, and it was at the time. I would say it was hard to get better. She must have caught 20 fish. Like imagine, like you don't fly fish and you get 20 fish. I'd say all of them 3 pounds plus, you know what I mean? Maybe 1, 2.5, or you know what I mean? But then a couple of 2.5. But that's what it was like in that particular spot,
Amazing.
Wow.
Is it hard to go back to say if you're heading back to Clonbur or wherever and you're fishing the Irish lakes? I know you can't compare, but
you can't really. You said the good thing was I used to go in October, so you'd forgotten it all by the time the Mayfly came. But this year I was back and I fished one afternoon with a mutual friend of Tom's and mine, Declan Gibbons, a great guy, works the fisheries there. And Dec rang me up and said, I was down with the kids and Maria for a few weeks. And I'll tell you what, it was like the only day's fishing I got when I was down. And we went out and I got one fish on the dry fly, which we were out in the deeps, which is not my favourite type of fishing. And Dec got a couple of fish, and then he said, we'll go in and try it. Sure, I got one on the dry fly, and I was delighted with myself, having come from 100 fish a day. But it was, it just, it's, the expectation, and unfortunately I find anyway, Tom, that those lakes have digressed seriously in the last number of years, in my opinion. Of certainly what I've been fishing. Maybe it's me now, but
it's happening. It's happening to you.
It could be me.
You mean you don't like the delights of fishing in a 100-foot depth of water, pulling at about 60 miles an hour? No.
Oh, yeah. And I'm not good at it, Tom. Honest to God, I'm not good at it. I think it was like my Connacht days. I didn't have pace, and I don't think I have pace for that either.
Yeah, you kind of do. God, no. Yeah, it is. I know what you're saying. It is kind of hard to come back. But, like, I mean, sometimes you're comparing apples and oranges sometimes.
But do you know exactly, what? Bring it back to actually, Tom, we spoke to Matthew Solon, the Clare man, who's guided the Ponoy, Patagonia, Seychelles, everywhere. And he says, there's nothing better than coming back to Derg for the Mayfly.
Yeah.
You
know, that's still his highlight. Like,
I fished down here, the shore and the Iron stuff like that to Andrew, and there's some very good fishing down there, which is really top class as well, you know, into some of those rivers. Like, and kind of got, because I've been on the lakes, I'm like, I've got to kind of get into the river fishing more in the last couple of years, which I really enjoy. And I know, Darry, you do a lot of that stuff. I really enjoy that.
Oh, no, that's actually, you've really whetted my appetite.
Yeah,
I have to say, for Montana there, like, really have. It sounded fantastic. Yeah.
We might try and put a trip together, Tom.
Yeah. Yeah, you're setting things going in my mind. Oh, we'll see.
I have to talk nicely to my wife again for another one in a couple of years' time.
Wait till the kids are 18, then you get out again. Like, you know.
Yeah. I'll only be able to sit in the boat then, I tell you.
Mike, before we go, we ask everybody who comes on the show one question. So we're going to ask you, what is your most memorable fish on the fly?
Yeah, I was trying to think about that one. And actually, the one I came up with, I got married in 2011 on the 1st of September. And when my wedding anniversary came along the following year, my wife happened to be visiting her sister in the Caymans. And I obviously took the opportunity to go down to the house. And it was a crap day, and I had to do something in the morning, and I picked up the phone, and you'll know this, Matt. I rang Brian Joyce, and I said, Brian, you have a boat in Loch Nafooey. I although my house looks over, I keep my boat in Loch Mask. I said, can I borrow your boat? I said, which I did regularly, to be honest with you, and he never, there wasn't not a bother. And he said, tell you what, he said, if you wait an hour, I'll go with you. And I said, fair enough, I'll bring my engine and we'll use your boat. It was miserable. And Loch Nafooey is a small lake that leads into Loch Mask, if you know it, and can fish very well at times, can fish very well in September. And we were fishing, there's one island on it, and we were kind of fishing along the island. He said to me, I'll pull out here, and we're getting in a bit close. And I threw my flies in, I'd say, to 4 inches of water. And I just stripped it as he was pulling back out, and I think I throw a picture of it there. It's the golden fish there, that a thing, 6 pound trout. It was gold in colour, and in the most miserable day. And I was looking over at my house at one stage, thinking it would have been much warmer to be in there. And then I got this fish, and my wife texted me that night and said, happy anniversary, because he was slightly behind. And I said, happy anniversary, and just sent her a picture of the fish.
Best anniversary ever.
Absolutely, yeah, exactly. Because if she was here, there's no way I'd have been out in Loch Nafooey and that fish would have been inside.
It is amazing though, isn't it? Like, the most unlikely of conditions, unlikely of spots. You don't even bother,
Absolutely.
You're thinking, will I go out or not? And then, boom, makes it all worthwhile. Like.
Yeah, and it was easier not to go out that day, and particularly to there. But I just had this thing, and I didn't go out till about, I say we didn't go out till like 2 o'clock, and it was like, it was dark. It was, in Tom knows, it's surrounded by mountains. It's like when the weather's bad.
It's an eerie place.
Yeah.
It can be an eerie place when it closes in like that. But you're right up against it. I've fished it a couple of times, Mike, and I've never had anything huge off it. But I mean, I know they're in it, and fair play to you. That was a cracker from it, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And funny enough, I don't think I've ever fished a time fly fishing and not got a fish in it. Would you believe?
Wow, yeah.
I don't think I've ever fished it, and I don't fish enough. I'd like to keep a boat. It's a hard place to keep a boat on.
It is actually,
it's the type of lake that it is. and you want to be there. But it's an
Definitely
unusual lake, Darren. It's a volcanic lake. It's all sand, a full beach at the end, a beautiful place. You know, full run down in the morning and go for a swim and stuff like that. It's gorgeous, but it can be kind of very deep in the middle, even for not a big lake. It's only about 3 miles long.
Yeah, the water can go up and down. A lot of the fish move in from Mask.
Like the same, it goes up and it's straight down because it just flows straight out the other end. Yeah,
incredible. Well, we'll put the picture up. People can have a look.
Yeah,
and see.
Oh, Jesus. Barrett said the picture. Joe Jas said the pictures. It's like, here I'm boasting here. No, well, I'm not really boasting, but I've got to be saying, look, I'm Joe Gray, but I'm not really. I'm an average fisherman, to be honest with you. But and I take people going to Montana, like, you learn a lot. You get the hang of it, and even if you're relatively new, the guides will make it easy for you. That's one thing I'd say.
Brilliant. Well, it's been brilliant stories, Mike, between the rugby for the first half and the fly fishing for the second half. Montana, it sounds incredible, but look, it's been brilliant chatting to great to hear the stories of another fly angler, and I hope you get back to Montana soon. You never know.
I hope so. And look, a pleasure, and thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's a real pleasure for me as well. Thank you.
Our thanks to Mike Cosgrave for joining us on the show. Don't forget to rate, review and follow the Ireland on the Fly podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from.
Plus, you can keep up to date on IrelandOnTheFly.com as well as on Instagram, and myself and Tom will be back with another episode about the people and places of fly fishing in Ireland.